Let's turn to fashion now. And we shall turn to both the Anglosphere and the land of the rising sun. This was constructed with AI, full disclosure for anybody who might have a problem with that. But then again, if you're an AI anti, I'm just going to say, if you watch these streams or any of my content, and you're somehow an AI anti, I say with a big Asmongold style grin, you're going to have a bad time. You're just going to have a bad time. I'm sorry. We're not antis around here. We make use of AI as a tool. Well, this was interesting. I wanted to get to this. The title of the video is from the Luxury Meltdown, Why the Japanese Suit is Quietly Killing Savile Row. Savile Row, you may recognize that as being a haven for men's fashion and bespoke tailoring in London. Been there myself. Lovely place. Shops are filled with incredibly knowledgeable people. Service is excellent. The prices are through the roof, so bring money if you want a Savile Row suit, but still kind of the gold standard if you want the best of the best. But I would say that there are budget-friendly alternatives out there in other parts of the world that they do just as good a job as Savile Row, and they don't break the bank. Several really good tailors in places like Vietnam, Hong Kong still, and even in Korea and Japan, you can find tailors that will do a fully bespoke or a made-to-measure suit for you, and it will be really, really good. As a matter of fact, I think there's one department store and I know there's at least one really good tailor in Sapporo, in the Hokkaido region of Japan. I think, if I remember their prices, this was about a year or two ago, might have changed due to inflation, but I think they were talking about doing gentlemen's made-to-measure suits somewhere between $500 and $750, which, before these inflationary times that we live in now, that was roughly what you would pay for a designer suit or even a department store men's suit off the rack. So getting made to measure for off the rack prices, I always consider that a bit of a bargain. We have good tailors here in Denmark, and Savile Row's not the only place in the UK with good tailors, not even in London. This is true. Keep Abercrombie and Fitch off the row. Yes. Don't let Abercrombie and Fitch into the row.
The finest bespoke suits in the world were once made on a single street in London. The Japanese have a word for that street, and it tells you everything. The word is Sabiro. It has been part of the Japanese language for over 150 years. It means suit. Specifically, a Western-cut wool suit, the kind a man wears to a meeting, a ceremony, a funeral. The word has no Japanese root. It has no kanji origin. It is pure phonetic borrowing, absorbed during the Meiji Restoration of the 1860s.
From Savile Row.
Opened its borders.
By the way, chat, a little bit of trivia for you. I believe this building that we're looking at here, the first generation Imperial Hotel. Second generation was designed by Frank Lloyd Wright. A portion of it still exists at the Meiji Muda Museum. They tore that one down. You now have the third iteration, which is I believe it's a twin tower structure. That, however, is scheduled to be demolished sometime before the decade is out, and a new fifth generation Imperial Hotel built in its place.
And began an extraordinary national project, the systematic study of everything the industrialized West had built. Among the things they were studying was a single street in London's Mayfair. The word they brought home was Savile
Henry
Row.
Poole.
That
That's
is
a good
where
one.
this story begins. In a certain way, it is also where it ends. For 3 centuries, Savile Row has operated as something that should not be able to exist in a capitalist economy, a natural monopoly built entirely on reputation. The street has no legal protection. Any tailor in the world
when
can
you're that
describe
damn
their
good,
product as Savile Row quality, Savile Row construction, Savile Row inspired. But for 200 years, the address itself carried a weight that no marketing department on earth could manufacture. The house of Henry Poole and Company, established in 1806, is
they were the
widely
OG.
credited with founding the Row as a tailoring destination. It was the first house to establish that this particular address meant something specific. Kings were fitted here. Winston Churchill wore his suits here. Cary Grant, the most studied man in Hollywood's long history of masculine style, had his coats cut at Anderson and Shepard. The Beatles recorded the last concert they would ever give together on the rooftop of Number 3. The client list reads like a private roll call of the 20th century's most powerful men, and behind each name is the same specific exchange. A man came to this street and paid to have himself expressed in cloth.
Huntsman,
The
Norton and
product was
Sons.
not simply a suit. It was a bespoke garment constructed according to a tradition that had changed little since the Napoleonic era.
And a fun little bit of trivia chat. We all tend to think of the character James Bond as getting all of his suits from Savile Row. And I'm sure, I believe Ian Fleming noted that in the novels. In the films, though, his suits were cut by a tailor named Anthony Sinclair. And Anthony Sinclair never once operated on Savile Row.
A paper pattern drawn exclusively for one body. A chest panel built from floating canvas, horsehair interlining that was stitched, never glued, so that it moved with the wearer and over decades molded to his posture. This is what the industry calls full canvas construction. The entire front of the coat supported by a floating layer of horsehair and linen that takes the shape of the specific body wearing it. The alternative,
Best way to
half-canvas
go.
construction, where only the chest is reinforced, is a respectable compromise. Fused construction, where the interlining is simply glued to the shell fabric,
That
is
never
the
lasts.
industrial standard, faster, cheaper, and fixed in shape from the day it leaves the factory. A true Savile Row coat required between 60 and 80 hours of hand labor. A garment that aged better than any other suit you owned, improved at 10 years, still improving at 20, carrying the physical memory of the man who wore it. That was the promise. For most of the Row's history, it was kept. In October of 2022, Jeeves and Hawkes ceased trading. The house had been founded in 1791. For over 2 centuries, it had outfitted the Royal British Navy, including Lord Nelson himself, who commissioned his uniform here before Trafalgar. Every subsequent monarch who required full-dress uniform had come through these doors. The building
Incredible.
at Number 1 Savile Row had been home to the house since 1974. It
I had a
went
chance to
dark.
visit Jeeves and Hawkes when I was in London
The
last.
brand was eventually sold. The address was eventually repopulated. But the event was a marker, and it was not the first. In the 15 years before that collapse, Hardy Amy's had closed. Several other houses
Yeah, I
had
remember
quietly
Hardy
converted
Amy's.
their offering from true bespoke to made to measure, a fundamentally different product built on pre-existing blocks adjusted to approximate measurements, without
Yeah.
once advertising the change to existing clients. The floating canvas, the hand basting, the 60
Why did they
hours of
show video of a smash and grab robbery? I do not understand. Absolute artist, Rex. Nothing beats a tailored suit. No, nothing beats a tailored suit at all. I love that line in the Crown where Edward tells these journalists that are visiting him and Wallace Simpson. I believe the line is, a well-tailored suit will take you very far in life. Truer words never spoken. Some established Savile Row tailors have moved off the row. I mean, that's some expensive real estate, so it's understandable. Glued construction will never beat stone. Very true. The glue deteriorates. Things that are glued together eventually become unglued, but stuff that's sewn together, it stays together. And really made to measure, it's not quite bespoke. They're taking pre-existing patterns and sort of shifting it around a bit to make it fit you, but it's still a higher quality garment than buying off the rack. Most tailors on and near Savile Row tend to have house styles. Some offer true bespoke. True bespoke can be rare and quite expensive. Most people these days, and they kind of play fast and loose with the terminology a bit. They talk about, custom tailored suits, blah, blah, blah. And it's made to measure. That's what it is.
craft, in many cases, had been retired around the same period that the price tags doubled.
Video's having a stroke.
Houses that once specified full canvas construction began delivering fused garments to clients who did not know the difference and were not told. The
That's not
mythology
okay.
remained.
That is not
Manufacturing
okay.
Did not.
That's very deceptive, very
The Japanese
dishonest.
had been watching all of this for a long time. To understand what they built in response, you have to understand how Japan approaches mastery. There is a Japanese word, shokunin. It translates roughly as craftsperson, But the English carries almost none of the weight. A shokunin is a person who has organized their entire life around a single discipline, not for recognition, not for celebrity, not for financial return, for the discipline itself. In Japanese culture, a shokunin who produces mediocre work is not considered unsuccessful. They are considered to have committed a kind of ethical failure, a betrayal of the craft, of the customer, of every craftsperson who came before them. When Japan adopted Western suiting in the 1860s, they did not approach it as fashion. They approached it as a system to be completely understood. They sent delegations to Europe. They brought back cloth samples, paper patterns, construction techniques. They sent their most gifted young tailors.
They did this with everything. They really did do this with everything. One of the more popular recent examples? Whiskey. Masataka Taketsuru is considered the godfather of Japanese whiskey. This was a man who, like so many of these tailors the video's talking about, went over to Scotland and apprenticed in the distilleries and spent years learning how to make the perfect whiskey. He even fell in love with a Scottish lass over there, married her, and then brought her back to Japan, where he took everything he knew about making whiskey and applied it on the home front. First, with his time at Suntory, and then breaking off and forming the Nika distillery. So it wasn't just suiting, and it wasn't just whiskey, it was everything.
To London, Milan, and Paris, and placed them in the best workshops they could find. They studied, with forensic attention, the reasons each technique worked the way it did, and then they returned home and spent the next 150 years improving the result. In the basement workshops and family-run studios of Osaka, not Tokyo, a city with no particular interest in fashion mythology or international reputation, an entirely distinct tailoring tradition developed across the 20th century, where Savile Row built its identity on the structured British shoulder and the military-derived drape cut, the London cut as it is known technically, with its suppressed waist, roped sleeve head, and built chest. Osaka's tailors became the world's finest practitioners of a different approach. The soft-shouldered, lightly constructed suit descends from the Neapolitan tailoring tradition of southern Italy, Naples specifically, where tailors developed a coat.
It's finer details, Chad, but there are differences. They're subtle, but you can tell there are differences between a British suit, an Italian suit, and an American suit. A lot of it is in the details. A lot of it is in the stitching, in the shoulders, the way the sleeves meet with the chest, and sometimes even with lapels. Yes, it's all a different silhouette.
That rested on the shoulder without padding, without a roped sleeve, moving with the body, rather than imposing a silhouette upon it. Japan absorbed this tradition alongside the British one, and in Osaka spent decades refining both, producing a garment that rests on the body without imposing weight, that moves without resistance, that requires almost no break-in period because the construction accommodates the wearer from the first day.
That's brilliant. It really is engineered to fit you like a second skin, which is exactly the point of a properly tailored suit. A properly tailored suit is one which does indeed fit you like a second skin. It still has a lot of room to maneuver, lots of mobility. It's not something that's necessarily stiff and restricts your movement or anything like that. If it does that, it's actually not a proper fit for you. One that allows for maximum freedom of movement and that fits you like it is a second skin. That's when you know you've got a really good suit. I love this. It's the one thing I've always loved about the Japanese and our Japanese culture is just this absolute obsession with quality and with continuous improvements. I love that about these people. I wish more parts of the world had that sort of mentality. This is the sort of autism that the world needs more of.
Ring Jacket was founded in Osaka in 1954. For most of its existence, the house was unknown outside Japan, producing garments for a domestic market that had quietly developed one of the highest concentrations of tailoring knowledge anywhere in the world. Today, it is regarded by the international sartorial community as one of the most technically accomplished suit makers at any price point. They're ready to wear. The bottom of their product range contains hand-sewn elements that take a trained tailor to produce and cannot
Hand-sewn
be
at the entry
replicated at
level.
scale
That's
by machine. Every coat leaves with a full
incredible.
floating canvas chest, hand-basted in stages by craftspeople whose training would not be out of place on the row at its height. Ring Jacket is not alone.
And they're just doing this for your standard off-the-rack suiting. I love that. I absolutely love that. Because this is not the sort of thing that needs to be restricted to the wealthy elite. It's something that truly does deserve to be democratized and be made available to all. American suits are boxier. I suppose in a way, yeah. But a bit more of a kind of a sloping shoulder than anything. Picturing Rex walking down the street, grabbing the guy walking past him and putting off his jacket and saying, "This is not a well-made suit. Why are you doing this to yourself?" I was like, you don't have to live this way, man. You can do better.
Producing out of the same Osaka tradition, has developed a following among collectors who are specifically searching for construction that Savile Row houses at 3 times the price cannot consistently deliver. The House of Kamoshita has taken the same discipline and applied it to softer, more contemporary silhouettes, attracting a younger professional audience that discovered Japanese tailoring before it discovered London. These are not approximations of Savile Row. They are distinct answers to the same question the Row has been answering for 200 years. What does a well-made suit actually require? A ring jacket suit costs between 600 and 1,200 pounds, depending on fabric selection. A comparable garment from a functioning Savile Row bespoke house, assuming the house still constructs by hand, which many do not, begins at 4,000 pounds and regularly exceeds 6,000 pounds. The craft gap that once...
Okay, so let's just do some maths here, chat. So on the low end, we had 600 pounds. Let me open up my currency exchange app. So 600 quid, that's approximately 700 euros or about $800 US. And then on the higher end, we're talking 6,000 pounds. That's about 7,000 euros or about $8,000 US.
Explained and justified that price difference no longer exists in the direction the British establishment would prefer. But the most revealing element of Savile Row's position is not even the tailoring itself. It is the cloth. The wool fabrics that occupy the top of the global hierarchy, the Super 120, Super 150, Super 160, and above lightweight wools that the...
these are the lightweight, finer wools, sometimes in... oftentimes I think that what you get in the sort of finer, more summery wool weaves, which if I have to choose the types of fabric, a summer wool, I tend to wear summer wool all year long, if I can, just because it's lighter, airier. If I need to bundle up in a colder climate, I'll put on an overcoat or put on a trench coat. You put on a layer. Or maybe I'll, put a sweater on underneath my suit jacket. If you need to get warmer, you can always layer up. But especially if you are a traveling person like myself, summer wools, summer, even tropical wool blends, to me, that's the better way to go. Because you can always layer up to get warm. There was also what you saw in the book versions of the James Bond series. Fleming was quite specific about that, about the types of suits that Bond wore. And he was quite specific because that's what Ian Fleming himself did. Because he was going back and forth each year between London and Jamaica. Because he had a flat in London, but he also had his home at Goldeneye in Jamaica. So constantly going from a really hot tropical climate to a rather cold climate by comparison in England. But summer and tropical wool blend suits, that tends to be what he wore, very light shirts made of Sea Island cotton. They tend to work for all seasons. And if you need to stay warm, especially in the wintertime in England, you just layer up. Heavy overcoat. sweater, something like that. Linen and cotton is good for summer suits. It really is. Seersucker is underrated. That too. I actually really like seersucker suits. There's a really good tailor in Louisiana. It's a men's shop. Well, I think it's a men's and ladies' boutique. But they specialize in seersucker clothing. Suits, dresses for the ladies. Suits also for the ladies. Really good quality. I think they were the ones that pioneered seersucker. I forget the name of them. I believe they're based out of New Orleans. But really, really good boutique. And really good. So I think they sell online too. And they ship nationwide and worldwide. But yes, linen cotton, quite good for summer suits. I know the costume designer for Miami Vice, Jodie Tillin, when she first started sketching out ideas for Don Johnson's wardrobe as Sonny Crockett. That was one of her first go-tos. Don Johnson was originally going to wear like denim jacket and blue jeans and cowboy boots and that sort of thing. Then he gets down to Florida and he realizes that, oh no, it's incredibly hot and humid here. I'm going to be just sweating through my clothes and I'm probably going to be dying at the end of a long day of filming. Yeah, you know what? Let's go with these designer linen and cotton suits from Armani and Hugo Boss. Yeah, you know what? Just wearing a simple pastel-colored t-shirt underneath a designer suit and no socks and just, nice pair of Gucci loafers, whatever they were. Yeah, you know what? That sounds like a better idea. We'll go with that.
Finest tailors in the world compete to use are graded by thread fineness. The higher the number, the finer the individual wool fiber.
I have a
and the
suit
lighter
jacket. I
the
believe it's made in
resulting
Super
cloth.
180s
Super
wool.
100 wool
So
are the reliable
nice.
working standard for a serious suit. Super 150 and above enter the territory of exceptional handle and drape.
Yeah, that's
Fabrics
luxury
that
level
respond
right
to
there.
hand tailoring in ways that machine construction cannot fully exploit. These grades, in substantial proportion, are woven in Japan. The mills of the Bishu region, houses like Miyuki Kaori and Kunishima in the Aichi, Fukui, and Gifu prefectures, produce fabrics of a fineness and structural integrity that the remnant Scottish mills, which once defined the upper ceiling of English cloth, struggle to match consistently at scale.
That's
Several
incredible.
of the most prestigious luxury cloth houses in Europe, houses like Loro Piana, Holland and Sherry, and
Loro Piana is everywhere these days, especially in men's suits, and particularly in men's tailored suits. So often I go to a boutique here in America, and most of what they have on offer in terms of your choice of fabrics, it's going to be from Loro Piana. They have become kind of the go-to for most everyone. There are other choices out there, but most of the time, you're going to be getting something from Loro Piana.
Tale Barbaris Canonico, whose names appear on every Savile Row cutting table, source significant portions of their top-tier fabric from Japanese mills and do not advertise this fact prominently.
Bishu wool.
The street that
I'm
gave
gonna
the
have to
world
remember
its
that.
word for the finest suit in existence is cutting many of those suits from cloth woven by the country it once sent students to teach. There is a figure in this story who makes the reversal almost too precise to be comfortable. In the 1980s, a young Japanese tailor came to London. He spent years on Savile Row, working under craftsmen who were among the last
Is
of
it
the
Issei
old
Miyake?
guard. Men who had learned their trade before the economic pressures of the 70s had softened the standards. He learned the drape cut. He learned the hand basting. He studied the floating chest canvas and understood not just the technique, but the mechanical reason it worked the way it did. He learned everything the row had to teach. He returned to Japan. He is now, by the consensus of the international tailoring community, one of the most technically accomplished bespoke tailors working anywhere in the world. His waiting list is 2 years long.
Good
His
God.
clients include men
That's about it. I think that's almost as long as it takes to get a new Ferrari. I don't know. The waiting list may have grown even longer. That's also in some places where how long you're waiting to get your hands on a Rolex, which, if that's the case, get yourself a Tudor. Tudor and Rolex, same corporate umbrella, both owned by the Hans Wilsdorf Foundation. Just get a Tudor. You won't be on a waiting list. You can actually walk out of the jewelers with your brand new Tudor watch, and yeah, honestly, a lot of people prefer them over Rolex. For a lot of people, Rolex has just become too blingy. Even something like a Submariner, the Tudor Black Bay 58, and I think it's the Black Bay 54 that's a smaller one. Those still have that kind of tool watch vibe to them, and they take a lot of retro styling cues from Rolexes of old. Not only that, you're not having to pay anywhere near as much as you would for a Rolex. I mean, a Submariner, right now, I think I checked the list price a while back, about $11,000 for a Submariner from Rolex. 10 grand for a Rolex Explorer 2, about 8 grand for just a regular Rolex Explorer, and 6 or 7 for an Oyster Perpetual. About 11 or 12 grand if you want a GMT Master 2. A Tudor Black Bay, either 58 or a 54, about 4 or 5 grand. So about half the price. And instead of a Rolex Explorer, getting a Tudor Ranger, 3 grand. Or about maybe 3,900, so close to 4 grand. So half the cost, but you're still getting Rolex quality. No brainer for me. Skip the wait list, get a Tudor. And for somebody like me, who loves the kind of retro style of the old Pepsi dial Rolex GMT Master 2s, you can get a Black Bay GMT that looks fairly close to those old ones. Absolutely looks the business. Beautiful watch. And the new Black Bay 58 GMT, with the combination of gilting and the whole Coke bezel and dial, it looks gorgeous. Kind of prefer the appearance of some Patek Philippe's more old-fashioned rectangular watches. Understandable. So like old Cartiers. Something to be said about a tank style watch.
Who once flew to London for their fittings, they no longer need to. He is not an exception. He is a category. Japan has been systematically producing tailors of this caliber for decades. The difference is that until recently, very few people outside Japan knew their names. The generation of men currently buying their first serious suits is not making the decision their fathers made. A 28-year-old professional in 2026 can, in the course of an hour, watch a Japanese tailor disassemble a bespoke coat and demonstrate on camera every construction decision inside it. The full canvas versus the fused front, the hand-basted sleeve versus the machine-set one. He can read forum discussions.
I want one of those Rolexes that has Mickey Mouse on it where he points to the minutes and hours. That is not a Rolex. That is not a Rolex. That actually, if memory serves me right, I even had one of those as a kid when I was in primary school. I had a Mickey Mouse watch. It's a nice one too. Citizen. I believe Citizen is the one that has made the Mickey Mouse watch. Clubhouse watch, yeah. Or at least they're one of the few that's still on the market, making that classic Mickey Mouse watch with the hands that point to the minutes and hours.
In which collectors who own suits from both Savile Row and Osaka compare them component by component. He can order a ring jacket suit from Tokyo, have it arrive in 10 days, and compare it against anything the Row is currently producing at 4 times the price.
Yeah, if you can get a ring jacket for 1,000 versus a 4 grand Savile Row, anything they produce, yeah, the economy is just, it makes sense. Go with the ring jacket. If it is just as good as this lot over here, and you're not having to pay as much, do that. So much of this is just overhead and bloat and everything else that I find hard to believe actually contributes to the making of a proper suit or a proper jacket.
The mythology of the address does not close that gap.
I was kidding. I know the Swiss have no whimsy. Rolex used to. Rolex certainly used to. I know there have been limited edition or like one-off versions that they have put out. At one point, there were executives with Domino's Pizza that once they hit a certain mark, like 10, 20 years with the company, they were gifted a specialty Rolex watch with the Domino's logo as either on the dial or it was built into the second hand. So they used to have some whimsy, not so much anymore. But it's very carefully curated, manufactured whimsy, like what you might see with Omega or Swatch or any of the brands in the Swatch group. But so much of Swatch group brands and their watches, so much of it is just, I don't know, to me has become so interchangeable and just not too much differentiation between them. You know, that Longines, for example, is owned by the Swatch group. And they have some beautiful watches. You know, the Spirit Zulu Time in blue with the orange GMT hand, I think is still one of the most beautiful GMT watches on the market right now. And for $3,000 for a Swiss automatic like that that's not terrible. That is not a terrible price, even though there are cheaper alternatives out there. But, you know, take, say, your standard Hydra Conquest dive watch, the new ones they've got from Longines, and then compare the design to the Omega Seamaster, and then compare it to another brand that they have in the Swatch stable, Stetina. And I don't know, it doesn't seem like there's a lot of differentiation. Like there's not much difference between them. And at that rate, you might as well just start folding up brands and just call yourself Swatch and just, you know, sell a single line at that point. So many tiny distinctions, but not much difference. That's kind of sad to see, especially for so many iconic watch brands. Love the Cartier watches, don't judge me. Oh, I'd be the last one to judge you for that, Kalergi. I happen to love the classic look of a Cartier Tank or a Santos. I know my dad has he's always sort of looked down his nose upon Rolex, and he's like, yeah, given the choice, son, I'd rather have a Cartier. No, I can see the appeal. They're lovely watches. I've heard of Saudi royals giving out Rolexes to bodyguards with the gifter's portrait on the face. I could see that. That sounds like something they would do. I remember once seeing a watch you could with a little yellow nightlight you could turn on. Was told it reduced battery time. Thought it was cool, and those glow in the dark ones. I wonder if you're talking about Timexes with the Indiglow. I mean, backlights have existed for watches for a long time now. Some better than others. Was too young to buy it, never seen ones like it since. Possibly might not be on the market anymore. Who knows, maybe it's a collector's item. Sounds like something to go on the hunt for.
For a buyer who has access to the information. The mythology only works on buyers who do not look too closely. Savile Row's response to this has been, in the main, to double down on what cannot be compared. No Savile Row house has published a side-by-side comparison with its Japanese equivalents. No trade body has
organized and they never will.
A formal technical
Why would
assessment.
they?
The street's marketing has leaned harder into the Georgian facades, the royal warrants, the association with Churchill and Bond, and the most photographed men of the last century. These are things...
Yeah, that's something that's always a bit of a point of pride with just about any British company is if they've got a royal warrant. Though as of late, the royal warrant, I think, has been given away too easily and acquired too cheaply by certain companies. I mean, there was that whole rumor about, I didn't look into it very much, but I think at one point, there's some sort of sex toy company or something like that claim to have a royal warrant, which is not if that's the case, there's desperate need for reform. You don't just give away something like that to just anyone. Savile Row tailors used to have a requirement of introduction, that is, to become a customer, someone had to introduce you, then you went through a period of recommendation and looking into. Yeah, that sounds about right. It's almost like with a lot of American steakhouses and some of the finer restaurants on both sides of the pond, and even some casinos and gambling establishments. They did not open their doors to just anyone. You had to have an introduction, you had to have recommendations, you had to be vetted to have the privilege to frequent that establishment. To make anybody a knight, why not hand out warrants like Mardi Gras beads? Sadly true, Jan, that is sadly true. I think it really says something, it says something quite negative for the honours system in the UK when people like Keir Starmer and even Sadiq Khan, God help us, can get a knighthood. I'm sorry, but I will never refer to either of those two people with the honorific of Sir before their names, especially Sadiq Khan. They may have, through questionable judgment of those handing out the honors, been given that honorific. They have not earned it in the eyes of a lot of people, me especially.
Japan cannot replicate. Henry Poole still holds the warrant. Huntsman and Sons still cuts the military drape. Anderson and Shepard still carries the names, and they are genuinely valuable to a certain kind of buyer. But among the collectors, the editors of the journals that track this industry at craft level, and the professionals who know what a well-made suit is supposed to feel like, the conversation has moved. They are not on 2-year waiting lists for Savile Row appointments. They are on 2-year waiting lists for Japanese ateliers that the Western fashion press has largely not yet covered. Savile Row is not dead.
Some of that may be by design. They want the advertising, but they don't. I guess they don't really want to have so many people bum rushing their shops, and they don't want just anyone as their clientele. Which, when we're dealing on this level with this type of product, makes sense. I think knighting should be reduced back to people of great national service in war, otherwise militarily. Makes sense, but Britain and the world, we've not had any sort of major war in quite a long time that would warrant, by that standard, giving them out. And of course, that may be the point. That may be the point that you're trying to make, Harold. Keep it rare. Don't necessarily hand it out to just anyone who's like, oh, you've done X amount of years of work in the civil service. Okay. You've gone from Humphrey Appleby to Sir Humphrey Appleby. What, just because you've been here long enough? It's like, no. Take the gold watch and fuck off. Take your gold watch and your pension and fuck off. So we go with periods without newly knighted people. That has been the case in the past before. That's true. That's true. We have gone for stretches where people just weren't knighted. People weren't given titles. Nobody needs a knighthood. No, that's true. Nobody needs a knighthood. It's just it's the upper crust. Their version of the upcomies and the good boy points and the clout. Sort of OG version of clout. Getting the knighthood, also getting other sorts of honors, Order of St. Michael and St. George, Knight Cross of St. Michael and St. George, all that sort of, your G, your, what is it, CMG, KCMG, GCMG for the civil service, and all of them part of the Order of St. Michael and St. George, but colloquially, in the civil service, CMG referred to Call Me God. KCMG, Kindly Call Me God. GCMG, God Calls Me God. I always love that, though. I love that joke from Yes Minister. Great primer on political science, if you ever wanted to watch something that's both entertaining but also surprisingly very informative. The old British comedy, Yes Minister and Yes Prime Minister. It's a fairly short series. There was only like a handful of episodes with each series. There's 3 cities of Yes Minister, Christmas Special, and then 2 cities of Yes Prime Minister. And each one of them was only about 5 episodes, thereabouts. So, and each of them 30 minutes. It's not long, but every single one of those episodes, an absolute gem.
But the case for its supremacy, once so self-evident that nobody needed to make it, now requires an argument that the Row has not yet chosen to have in public.
They're dealing with the same problem the Swiss have with watches.
Once believed Savile Row represented the highest expression of what a man's suit could be. In 2026,
it's kind of that whole refrain of, don't you know who we are? Do you know who I am? It's like, yeah, you used to be Savile Row. You used to mean something, but you're not the only game in town anymore, mate. Oh yes, Agatha Christie's Poirot, Jeeves and Wooster. Jeeves and Wooster was really, really good. And definitely recommended reading, recommended viewing if you can get your hands on like a copy of the DVD box set. P.G. Wodehouse, brilliant author. Definitely worth a read, or even just pick up the audiobook of the series of Jeeves and of Jeeves books. It's excellent.
Most accurate thing that can be said about the relationship between these two traditions is this. Japan kept the promise that Savile Row made and gradually stopped keeping, not loudly, not with press releases or industry awards or viral comparisons. Quietly, methodically, with the patience of craftspeople who were never in a hurry. The row is still standing. The brass plaques are still polished. The Georgian townhouses look exactly as they did, but the men who know what a suit should feel like are increasingly not inside them.
They realized there's another game in town, and so they went to the other game in town rather than put themselves on the wait list. People came out and protest in favor of Savile Row 10 years ago. Give three-piece a chance, keep Abercrombie off the row, that sort of stuff. Remember it being in the weekend news. Remember the chap covering it. And other classic menswear magazines, even some YouTubers. Yeah, something like Abercrombie and Fitch does not belong on Savile Row. Just full stop. That is the sort of attire that is... It's made in sweatshops and belongs in something like an American-style shopping mall or outlet mall than it does in rather hallowed piece of real estate like Savile Row.